My name is Angela Kessler. I am the executive director of the Derby Community Foundation in Kansas. So we are the Kansas that you saw on the slide earlier this morning. So it's really great to be here with you today. And my colleague?
I'm Kevin Dietrich. I'm with the Willmar Area Community Foundation here in Minnesota.
So great. We will let some of those folks make their way in. What did you all think about the lunch session? Yeah, really good, really good. So, well, you are in the DAF Advantage, helping family foundations transition to greater impact. So if that's where you're not supposed to be, now's your time to exit gracefully. So we really just want to have some conversation with you guys. So it is after lunch. It is the last session of the conference. So we really want to have some engagement and discussion with all of this because we really believe there's a lot of experts that are in the room as well. So I'm going to do a little bit of the introduction, and then Kevin and I are just going to kind of kick it back and forth with some information. But please, as you have thoughts or comments or your own experiences in this, please interject. So, all right. This is a new thing, so I'm getting used to that. So, all right. So we all know that family foundations have been built from a really deep desire to create lasting legacy and local impact. But over time, those can start to feel burdensome, and those can change. Family dynamics can change. And so our session today is going to explore how community foundations can position donor advised funds as strategic, value-aligned solutions for family foundations. So we know that DAFs can offer families a way to preserve their legacies and also continue their charitable giving. So today, we are going to walk through some real-life examples of some family foundations that have made the transition to DAFs, and we're also going to look for opportunities on how to spot those family foundations, how to build relationships, and how to structure those funds. So I do want to say this conversation is not about liquidation. It's about legacy. It's about keeping that legacy intact for those families, and it's about helping them staying generous to their communities. So, does that make sense? Wonderful. So, I really want to take this out of here. I either need to be taller or shorter. So, before we get started, we'd like to get an idea of who's in the room today. So, if you are a board member, would you raise your hand? Great. And if you are a nonprofit or community foundation staff, raise your hand. Great.
And specifically, any development or executive director staff? Okay, thank you.
Great. And how many have you been in your roles for 5 years or less? Raise your hand. Great. How many 6 or more years? Wonderful. Great.
All right, thank you very much. That kind of helps a little bit, especially from my perspective. So this next section is why family foundations, and then why are they right for this conversation. And number one, having donor relations, which is kind of a fancy way of saying development, I've got numbers to hit. And when I look around at what I think is low-hanging fruit, the conversation in personally business DAFs and then family foundations are two of the easiest conversations for me to have. From a family foundation perspective, they already made the decision that they want to do something philanthropic with dollars, and they've set dollars aside to do that. So that's more than half my battle is already done. I don't have to mess with any of that. And then and then the second piece is why are they right for the conversation? We can solve a ton of problems they don't know that they have. First of all, so I'm 57 years old. I don't know anybody under my age that started a family foundation. It's not as much of a thing as it has been in the past. So it's generally the generation that's higher than that. So what we're looking at is transferring the direction of where that foundation goes to the next generation. Yeah, a lot of kids and grandkids. don't care. That was Grandma and Grandpa's deal, and they haven't necessarily been trained or are on board with that full itinerary or direction, agenda that Grandma and Grandpa had. Number two, you've got to have an audit every year. You've got to take notes. You've got to file taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of costs associated with family foundations. With a donor advised fund, not so much. It can save a ton of money, which means more money goes directly to the charities that are set up. Additionally, we can pre-identify targets and places with the DAF on where, Grandma and Grandpa or whoever set up the DAF wants things to go. So they don't always have to rely on that second or third generation to come up with those kind of things. And then the last one that I'm going to mention, sometimes the assets within a family foundation can be kind of interesting. One of the ones I'll talk about in a few moments is ethanol stock. Yeah, I don't want to own ethanol stock. So if we can sell that stock and invest that in one of our existing or current options, it just streamlines everything. I don't have to worry about paying my corn fee each year. I don't have to worry about all these other kind of things that the family foundation had to deal with. So it has the ability to do a lot of streamlining very quickly.
How many of you work with family foundations in your communities? Kind of, yes.
How big?
Yeah.
So hers is beautiful. It's over $3 million, and she'll tell you about that. The ones that I've worked with, and we've been getting about one a year, they're all in that couple $100,000 range, which is just, check that box. It's not something that, when you look at the expenses going out for what the value of the fund is, it just makes a lot more sense to move to a DAF. So it makes that conversation quite a bit easier.
The other thing a DAF can do for those that are involved in a family foundation, and if they want it, is it can also offer some level of privacy for the family foundation, whereas those dollars are coming into a community foundation, into a donor advised fund, and they can grant those dollars out anonymously, which can be a perk for family foundations or those who are going through that succession transition, and maybe those kids just that's not their thing, that's not where they want to be. A DAF can kind of offer that level of privacy for them that they haven't considered. So that's also a great piece, a talking point as well.
Where to find family foundations? For me, it's been a lot of conversations. I've only got a handful of attorneys or CPAs in town that kind of do that, and so I'm having conversations with them on a regular basis. I've created a simple, actually AI created it, and Courtney and Chrissy helped out a little bit. And it's just a real simple trifold that I can drop off that it literally just says, simplifying a private family foundation. And then it just got a couple of the bullet points that I mentioned as far as saving dollars with the audit and some of those other kinds of things. Just to be there, because at some point, as a lawyer or the CPA, they're going to run into the situation where, okay, the originators have passed, what do we want to do with this? The easiest way for me is been speaking with those folks. Second of all, I get annual reports from all my nonprofits in our area. So the Food Shelf and Family Promise and et cetera, and I go through and I look who's giving to them. And every now and again there's, I didn't know they had a family foundation. That's kind of interesting. And so now that's on my radar. I always run the GuideStar or Instrumental and look up the 990s and find out what kind of giving they've given in the past, because that also will help me when I end up having conversations with them to know that generally speaking they give to kids, or they give to the environment, or they give to whatever thing. Some of them are all over the board, but it gives you that kind of an idea for that conversation to go. Primarily, though, estate planning attorneys and CPAs have been, for me, the biggest place to hit. I also, when I have the opportunity to do my oh man, I should have had more sugar.
Yeah, it's after lunch crash.
It's exactly what it is. When I do my my conversations with all the staff at one of these locations, I always kind of bring up one of those bullet points. So hopefully that it's ticking with somebody with, oh yeah, I've got one of those that we do the taxes for. So, but the Kiwanis and Rotary, those are great places too. Generally speaking, in our area, everybody on the Lions, the Rotary, they're all just a little bit older. Some of them are retired and have these kind of family foundations or know about them, and having that conversation is easy then.
Not only looking at the annual reports of the nonprofits that are in your community, but also having conversations with them. You know, they're getting dollars from some of those family foundations, and let's just be honest, some of them have really good relationships with those family foundations, right? So it's just about having those conversations with them. Maybe there's an opportunity for an introduction there. Maybe there's an opportunity for some combined funding. You never know. So I would also start with your local nonprofit leaders and staff to see what relationships they have as well, because they can tell you a lot about family foundations. You know, are they very strict on their giving? Are they in the sense of grants in, grants out? Are they really hard deadlines, or do they give out additional funds? What do they like to support? So those conversations can also be really key in finding out what your local foundations are interested in supporting.
The very first example I'd like to give you is I'll just use the name Danny, the Danny Family Foundation. It was set up by mom and dad who passed many years ago. They were the owners of a small community bank. Set up, had very nice success, started a family foundation, and their daughter was the main, it was her responsibility to keep that legacy and keep it going. It's got a couple $100,000 in it. It did have some ethanol stock, which was the primary feeder, but it also had some cash originally put in there from some other assets after they had originally passed. One of the challenges they ran into is the daughter and then her daughter, so daughter, granddaughter, were the two advisors. Mom is now in her late 70s, and daughter is in her late 70s, and has dementia and Alzheimer's. And the daughter kind of forgot about the family foundation completely, and they hadn't done any tax filing in multiple years. And so now all of a sudden, because they didn't kick out the certain percentage that they have to kick out every year, because they hadn't been filing taxes, there's all kinds of fees and fines that adversely affect the foundation. Additionally, granddaughter's just not that into wanting to, I know I was on it, but in searching for paperwork to find that she had the right to help advise it, et cetera, ended up being a huge issue. We were able to, through conversations, have them deposit maybe 75% of the dollars into a DAF, which then was good with the IRS because money was going out. We left about 25% in to help pay for any accounting and fees and things along that lines, so that they were able to start shutting that down. And then now all I need is a simple form signed whenever they want to send any dollars out to the ambulance fund or the firefighters or anything that they see in the community that they want to work with. So it just tightened it way up. I think where we're going to end up going with that, I think the granddaughter, we're going to identify a handful of, it's still a small town, we're going to identify probably 4 or 5 different charities in town and assign a percentage, and then either yearly kick out an amount for that, or do a one-time distribution and eventually shut it down. But in the meantime, no offense, Steve, I got a new fund, so I got that check mark. I just generated some new dollars for the foundation, so I generated that check mark. So hopefully I'm holding on to my job another 3, 6, 9 months, that kind of a situation. So, any questions on that?
So we have recently converted a family foundation into a DAF, and I will say in all transparency, I'm new in my role, and the previous executive director, and what I'm about to share, she's the one who did a lot of the relationship work a year prior, and then I'm the one who gets to reap in the rewards of now working with that family in our community foundation. So I would just wanted to clarify that. But we have a family foundation in Derby that has been there for a long time, and a well-known family. So if you're from that area, you would know them. Several parks and locations around our city are named after them. And you know, they started actually a scholarship fund at our community foundation about 15 years ago. Education was really important to both of them, and they have given out 5 or 6 scholarships annually to local high school students. So that's really where their relationship with us started. And over time, that relationship grew. They still established and had their family foundation and made gifts and grants to the community, but also utilized the Derby Community Foundation as their scholarship fund. And quite honestly, a really great relationship happened because Derby is a community of about 25,000. We are just south of a city called Wichita. Some might say we're in a suburb, but if you're from Derby, you're not in the suburb, you're in the city of Derby. So we're about 15 minutes south of the city. So I think that what was really important about this is that relationship formed over time. And also over time, the family dynamics changed. So unfortunately, the husband passed away. And so the shifts in giving for the family changed because the wife really started tipping her interests in what her giving was, and still honoring his legacy. But she's just really, really passionate about animals, and so we saw a lot of her giving shift in that area. But the other thing that happened is family dynamics changed during that time too, and the relationship with our foundation also changed, because what we found ourselves doing is when we were doing our community enrichment grant rounds and giving money out into the community, this family foundation, she was calling us and saying, who can you not fund? Who can I fund? Where do you guys not have enough money? I want to give from my family foundation. So we had this really unique dichotomy where we could call them and we could say, hey, we're going to work on this project and we're going to give X amount of dollars. Would you mind giving the original X amount of dollars from your family foundation? So we had this kind of great relationship. And so that really spurred the opportunity to have the conversation to say, hey, your family dynamics have changed, successors have changed, the confidence in her children in carrying on that legacy and her intent wasn't as high as maybe it had been in the when that first family foundation was formed. And so she knew by moving those assets over to a DAF that we could help maintain that intent, and we could help her with that legacy. And so we did it actually over the course of two calendar years. We actually just finished transferring assets at the end of 2024. It's now 2025, right? Yes, okay. So we just finished transferring over the 2 million, the additional 2 million in 2024. So it was about a $3 million conversion for us, and for us in Derby, that's a huge amount of money for us and for our community. And we're also a part of some additional things that are coming down the pike with her and that family. And so starting this year, when we were doing scholarships and looking at grant giving, it was fun. She could just call. She could make one phone call. I mean, I literally had this conversation with her 2 weeks ago, maybe. She said, this is so easy. I can transfer my dollars in my DAF over to my scholarship, and I can just call you, and you can fill out a form, and it's done, and I don't have to worry about going back and forth, and, did this happen, and the timing, and everything. And so, we literally just had that conversation, because she also finalized, their committee finalized their scholarships just this week as well. So, it's been a transition. I mean, we say that, just transfer it over, and we say it in 5 minutes, like it just takes that amount of time. But we realize it takes time. It takes relationship building, it takes conversations, it takes a lot of back and forth. So we're not naive to that. But once you get it on the other side, it can be a really great relationship.
next example, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, Dave Swanson with the Greater White Bear Lake Community Foundation. You've done a nice job of kind of listing out the advantages of DAF over family foundation. What would be the counter to that? What are the advantages, if any, of a family foundation over a DAF?
Good question. Well, does anybody want to take that?
Steve, do you want to? Because I honestly, I don't think there are. I don't see any. There's a minimum requirement. There's taxes. There's et cetera, et cetera. Maybe paying people who are on the board.
We're biased, so we're biased. So.
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents worth on it and what I've seen over the years. I'm Steve Jewell with Community Giving. I think one of the things initially has always been control. So when a individual or a family sets up a private foundation, they have absolute control of that particular entity within the rule of law. With a donor-advised fund, we have to continue to talk about that you are an advisor, and technically it's the board of the community foundation that absolutely has the control. So, and because of that, there's different tax consequences for them, and it depends on their personal situation. Generally, giving to a publicly supported charity, which is a donor-advised fund, is going to be probably more generally advantageous, but not necessarily, because they could possibly have different situation in their own personal life that might lend itself to a better fit for a private foundation. So the one thing in all of this, and just thinking about it, is to have good legal counsel. Yeah. Visit with your own legal counsel who represents the foundation, but then also that donor and that donor's legal counsel should be involved too. And that's just because we know a lot of great ideas, but they're going to know the technical legal aspects of it. But the number one reason that we've seen is that people and donors like the control. They maybe want to have a board of directors, and they maybe want that board of directors to get together on an annual basis. Sometimes I think they try to expense, or they do expense that meeting that happens to be in a very nice place to bring the family together. So there's all kinds of variety of reasons maybe why, but that issue of control is important. And I think that, one last thing I would add is that I had a chance to visit with a gentleman who worked for Fidelity. And Fidelity, of course, many of you know, is the largest single community foundation in the United States today through the Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund. And so I was just visiting with him, and I'm saying, what size of gifts do you see? And are you seeing a $50 million or $100 million gift flow in? And he said, at that time, this was a few years ago, he said in the last year they'd had 3 $1 billion gifts or more. So that tells you that it used to be people would set up a community or a private foundation for $20 million. But in today's world, with the very large charitable gift funds, people with large assets are finding it more advantageous to be part of a donor-advised fund, and sometimes through the commercial gift vehicles. But the opportunity exists for that to happen also at the local community foundation.
He also mentioned that there was if it was a certain size or smaller.
No, their minimums today at Fidelity and most of those, the charitable gift funds are almost zero. I don't want to say zero, but it's, $50 or that you can set up a gift fund now at some of those entities. So the one thing though, that the Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab, the Fidelity guy also told me this at that time. He said one of their challenges was that they could not, and he was being honest, that they were having a hard time adequately supporting the grant making for these many, many, many donors that they have, from a standpoint that it wasn't personalized. It's all electronic. And to have a personal program officer to talk to a donor about their giving, I think at the time he said it was a $50 million threshold. So lots of opportunities for the local community foundations to be at the forefront of really helping local donors give money back and build those relationships.
I just had a question. You stepped in and kind of took over a longstanding relationship, and I think about donors. And in my work, I represent a community foundation, and the community foundation will exist long after me. So how do you keep that personal connection, but really bring in that this is a foundation that's going to be here second, third generations, so that bigger relationship is made with the donor?
That's a good question. And in all honesty, I'm still building that relationship with this, with this donor itself. And, we're going through scholarships for the first time together. So it's also really about talking about what the foundation is doing versus what I or you are doing. It's also about making sure that our donors and our fund holders have relationships with more than one person at the foundation. That can be hard when you are maybe a one-person show or a 1.5 person show. So it's about making sure that those donors, and in our case, that our donor has good relationships with board members. And ours is unique in that she's lived in the community for a number of years, and so she sits with our board members at Rotary, and they have been friends, and they ride horses together and they do all their things. So it's about making sure, I think, that those donors are connected to more than just one person. The other thing is, Derby is a division of community giving. And so this donor in particular has had conversations with our community giving staff. Her professional advisor has had conversations with our community giving partners. So it's about making sure that they have those relationships. It's funny, Elise with Community Giving came down to Derby. She made the trek all the way down to Kansas. Oh. And when I called up this donor and I said, hey, Elise is going to come, and she was so excited. Vicki was so excited. She said, oh, I'm so great. I can't wait to see her in person. So it's about making sure that they have those connections with more than just you. I don't know if I answered your question or if I... Okay.
The next one that I want to mention is in Willmar, we've got one, I'm going to call it the Andy Family Fund. It was a pull your bootstraps up kind of an individual who created a pretty large business, and then once started to age, started a family foundation. With that, wanted to make sure that each year dollars were given to students who struggled, came from a struggling background, but needed or wanted to go to school. And so the way it was set up, it was actually kind of a loan program that they had set up. And the advisors of that were retiring, were originally on that board when they were in their 20s and 30s, and now we're in their 60s and 70s, and they're like, we can't find anybody who wants to do this anymore. Do you think you can help out? Well, yes, we can, so we can always tell that story. We didn't turn it into a DAF, we turned it into a true scholarship, and in the questions of the scholarship, and we went back and forth with that existing board, what are the kind of questions that we need to have? So the kids honestly have to identify that what their struggle was to get. Now, in the last year or two, it's been a lot of COVID stuff. But what kind of struggles? Am I first generation? Am I the first one in my family to go to college? Have I been working multiple jobs, not being able to do things? So we've been able to identify exactly, keep in line with that, and then we make it actual scholarships because the fund has done well enough that they don't need to pay it back. And then also with each scholarship award comes something that the gentleman had written about himself and about why it was important for him to give to the community. So then our responsibility is to hold on and keep that legacy going so that people understand the value of the generations before.
And I will just add something to Steve's point earlier. I think another deciding factor for the example that I've given for the Family Foundation to transition to a DAF was also to continue to support the community foundation, to support the Derby Community Foundation, because she knew what that would do for our foundation. She knew what then that could also do for the community. And so that really was a good key deciding factor for her as well. And I forgot to mention that. So if you don't have, how many of you have local family foundations that you are working with or that you know about. So can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that? What does that partnership or that relationship, discussion, not discussion maybe look like?
Hi, yeah, my name is Carrie, and I'm with the Central Minnesota Community Foundation, working on a couple different family foundations. The one we transferred over, a cop had passed away, and they opened a family foundation in his memory. And after 20 plus years, they just were tired of filling out the 990s and the tax forms and stuff like that. And so they really wanted to continue his legacy, but just have a little bit more ease on the paperwork. The next one that we're working on is a local foundation that was set up in memory of a son that had passed away. And their thing is that they do like the control of where that money is, but they also know that their life is just changing. It's been quite a few years now. They've given out a little over $500,000 to $1 million, so they're ready to just kind of continue his legacy, but just take a step back. So that was exactly what everybody's just been saying.
Great, thank you for sharing. Another one in the back.
I've done grant writing for 20 years, and I would say that every family foundation is a little bit different. The requirements for how you ask for a gift are a little bit different. Some of them, it's just a conversation over coffee. Some of them, it's sending an email or a one-page letter. And others, like the McKnight Foundation, have a very arduous grant process because they have so much wealth and capacity to make an impact in the community. I think it's important to treat them the same as you would an individual donor. A lot of times family foundations get lumped into that foundation category. I tend to lump them into the individual category because it really is individuals who are making those decisions. And a lot of time they have their entire family sitting on their board or as the trustees of the foundation. And so there can be different personalities that you need to get to know and work with. But it's the same as working with an individual who is thinking about their family's giving, even if they don't have a family foundation.
Thank you. Anyone else? How many of you don't have or know of family foundations in your community or area? There can be, yeah. So where do you find them? Like, what what things do you look for if there isn't the obvious, family foundation sitting right next to you at Rotary kind of thing? Where do you find that, right? So there's a couple places that you can look, or you can have conversations. So, and what are the things maybe you want to look for in those family foundations? So, one of the things you can look for are how often are those boards meeting of those family foundations? Are they meeting regularly, or have they not met for several years? That can be a key factor in some change happening. Maybe they only make 1 or 2 grants per year. And now, granted, I will say that might be normal for them, so you have to do a little research there. But maybe they are only doing 1 or 2 per year. Maybe they do 1, and then there's a little bit of a gap for a year, and then there's another one. And so you can start to see a pattern of inefficiency almost sometimes. You can also see or hear that maybe their next generation isn't interested. Maybe after you've done some research, you find out their family isn't around anymore. They're completely off doing something different, and there's no connection to maybe either family or their community in which they were raised. So that can also be an opportunity for discussion. Also just not meeting paperwork, not filing, missing filing deadlines. Those can be some key markers for some family foundations that might need some additional help. And then also, I think, just back to my original example of looking at family foundations to where you can also just work with them, so, see what they're funding. Like I said, our example is, I think, a little bit unique in the fact that we worked very closely together before assets were transferred over to our community foundation. And so not only looking at them as, an opportunity to liquidate, but an opportunity to help with legacy, I think, is key. Anything else there, Kevin, that we missed? Or
Not necessarily. So we're in the process of moving one over. We're kind of doing a trial run, and so $50,000 came in to open a DAF to kind of see how it went. I want the whole $500,000, but to start, 50 grand is just fine, and kind of show them how that process is going to work and how easy it can be. And but then we'll have that conversation on, well, what do you think? And how easy it was, et cetera, and we'll hit all those points. And I firmly believe within 18 months or less we'll have transferred that over. It just makes sense on so many different levels for this family that we're working with right now.
Yeah. So I will say, I forgot when this session started that I have to catch a plane. So I am going to excuse myself a little bit early from this session so we can make it there on time. So I just have about 3 more minutes. So if anybody has any questions that are specific to anything that I said, I'm just going to defer them to Kevin here. So, and I apologize for having to leave early scheduling. So there's only one flight, if you need to know this. There's only one flight to Wichita, and it is either 7:30 in the morning or 6:30 in the evening. So if I had a choice, we would be doing something different. So.
Yeah, just a quick, easy question on the information you were talking about. How often do they meet? How often are they granting? Are their filings current? Where are you finding that information?
So where are we finding that information? Those of you that are doing it. Yep.
I would say go to GuideStar.
Yeah.
You can also subscribe to like the foundation directory online. The Minnesota Council on Foundations lists a lot of information as well. And if you aren't fortunate enough to have a grant writer or prospect researcher on your staff, there are different freelancers out there. There are also different businesses out there that you can contract with to do special projects and have them put together research that's even specific to funding your type of organization.
You can also talk to those local nonprofits again, because if they have relationships with those foundations and that relationship has changed, they can also be a good indicator for something's going on there. So some of your local nonprofits, in my previous role, we worked really closely with a family foundation, and now that I'm sitting in my community foundation role, I see now what's happening with them. And as somebody who was sitting on the nonprofit side, I was like, what's happening? This is changing. The dollars are decreasing. The intentional giving has changed. And then lo and behold, come to find out, the patriarch was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and there's change, and there's a lot of turmoil within the foundation. And I didn't see that sitting on the nonprofit side, but now I see it sitting on the community foundation side. I'm like, oh, those were some key signs that were happening. So there's another source that you can look for.
And I like GuideStar because it's free. And then you can look at the last 4 years worth of 990s. You can see exactly what they've given to, who's on their board, if they get paid, et cetera, et cetera. So it shows all that stuff.
Speaking of people who do the work, there's an organization called Access Philanthropy who does grant writing, and they have a workshop webinar coming up on small family foundations in Minnesota giving away less than $2 million annually. So that would be a group where they're going to tell us a whole list of foundations. There would probably be prospects for these. So now I know I should register.
And so for Willmar, we're 165 funds, $30 million. So in the with these three, soon to be another one, it's over $1 million that we are now, have under our umbrella. And so that helps in a lot of different ways. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Hope your arms don't get tired flying back.
I know. I will. Thank you.